Officer Marcus Rodriguez's eyes widened in horror as the trunk lid rose, revealing the black duffel bag. The zipper was partially open just enough to expose a human hand, pale and lifeless. Behind him, his partner Dave was still questioning the driver, a lanky man with hollow eyes who called himself John Smith. "Dave," Marcus called, his voice barely audible over the passing traffic. His hand instinctively moved toward his service weapon. "Dave, I need you over here now." That's when Marcus heard the first shot. Then another. A searing pain erupted in his shoulder as he turned, watching Dave crumple to the asphalt. The driver stood over his partner, smoke still rising from the weapon in his hand. Their eyes met for one eternal second before the barrel swung toward Marcus. Time seemed to slow as the driver's finger tightened on the trigger. 3 hours earlier. "You're late again, Rodriguez," Sergeant Wilson barked as Marcus rushed into the precinct, balancing a tray of coffees and a bag of pastries. "Sorry, Sarge. Stopped to grab breakfast for the team," Marcus replied, setting down the provisions on the communal table where officers gathered before shift change. Officer Dave Harlan, Marcus's partner for the past 6 years, snagged a coffee with a grateful nod. At 52, Dave was counting down the days to retirement exactly 17 days from now. His silver hair and weathered face told the story of 27 years on the force. "Saved by sugar and caffeine again," Dave muttered, taking a sip. "But Wilson's right. This is the 3rd time this month." Marcus sighed, running a hand over his shaved head. Adriana had a rough night with the baby. Colic. He didn't mention the argument that followed, or how he'd slept on the couch again. Dave's expression softened. "How old is little Elena now?" 4 months yesterday. Marcus couldn't help the smile that spread across his face. Despite the sleepless nights and the tension with Adriana, Elena was the light of his life. His phone background was a photo of her tiny hand wrapped around his finger. "Time flies," Dave said, a faraway look in his eyes. "My Jessica's starting college in the fall. Seems like yesterday she was in diapers." "Speaking of time," Sergeant Wilson interrupted. "Roll call in 2 minutes, gentlemen." The briefing was standard reports of a string of convenience store robberies in the South District, a missing teenager from the East Side, a drug bust scheduled for tomorrow that would need additional units. Marcus and Dave were assigned to patrol the West Sector, their usual beat. "Keep an eye out for that silver Camry mentioned in yesterday's briefing," Wilson reminded them. "Suspected in a home invasion last week. And Rodriguez?" "Yes, Sergeant?" "Try to stay awake out there." A few chuckles rippled through the room as Marcus nodded sheepishly. As they headed to their patrol car, Dave tossed him the keys. "You drive. I'm feeling generous." "You sure? After being called out for tardiness, I figured you'd want to exert your senior officer privileges." Dave shrugged. "Consider it an early birthday present." Marcus caught the keys, surprised. "My birthday's not for 2 months." "Then I'm really early," Dave replied with a wink. "Besides, I want to call Jessica during lunch, finalize some details for her campus visit next weekend." They settled into the patrol car, the familiar routine of checking equipment and logging into the system second nature after years together. Marcus adjusted his body cam while Dave radioed in their departure. "Domestic disturbance on Magnolia Street," the dispatcher announced as they pulled out of the station. "Any units in the vicinity?" Dave picked up the radio. "Unit 327 responding. ETA 5 minutes. And so began what should have been an ordinary shift, a domestic dispute that ended with a tearful reconciliation, a fender bender with no injuries, a report of suspicious activity that turned out to be a film student working on a project. After lunch, they cruised down Riverside Drive, the tree-lined street offering momentary shade from the relentless summer sun. Dave was unusually quiet, staring out the window. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked, glancing at his partner. Dave sighed. "Just thinking about what comes next. After the job, I mean." "Having second thoughts about retirement?" "Nah, it's time. This knee won't take much more pounding the pavement." Dave rubbed his left leg, injured years ago in a foot chase. "But 30 years, Marcus. What the hell am I supposed to do with myself after that? Fishing, golf, spoiling grandkids when Jessica gets around to it." Dave snorted. She's got to finish college first and find someone worthy of her. He turned to look at Marcus. What about you? Ever think about doing something else? Marcus shook his head. Not really. This is all I've ever wanted to do. It was true. Since he was 8 years old, watching an officer talk a jumper down from the bridge near his childhood home, Marcus had never considered any other path. Keep that enthusiasm, Dave said. But start saving now. Retirement comes faster than you think. The radio crackled with a report of a shoplifter at the mini-mart 3 blocks ahead. As Marcus hit the lights and turned left toward the scene, neither officer noticed the silver Camry pulling out from a side street behind them. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds gathered overhead, promising a summer storm. They had just finished dealing with the shoplifting incidenta teenager who broke down in tears, saying he'd stolen the food because his mother had lost her job. Dave, in a rare show of mercy, had paid for the items and issued only a warning. Getting soft in your old age, Marcus teased, as they climbed back into the cruiser. Maybe, Dave admitted. Or maybe I just remember what it's like to be hungry. As they pulled back onto the main road, dispatch reported a hit-and-run 2 miles north. Marcus flipped on the siren and accelerated, weaving through traffic. That's when Dave spotted a silver Toyota Camry with a dented rear fender, exactly matching the description from the morning briefing. 3 o'clock, Dave said sharply. Silver Camry. Partial plate match. Marcus eased off the gas, letting the Camry pass them before pulling in behind it. Dispatch. Unit 327. We have a visual on the silver Camry from the BOL. Initiating traffic stop on Westlake Drive. The Camry initially seemed to comply, slowing and pulling toward the curb, but then suddenly accelerated, tires squealing. We've got a runner, Marcus announced, hitting the siren again and giving chase. The pursuit lasted less than a minute. The Camry driver, perhaps panicking or inexperienced, attempted to turn onto a narrow side street and clipped a parked car, spinning out and coming to rest against a lamppost. Following protocol, Marcus stopped the patrol car at a safe distance. Both officers drew their weapons as they exited the vehicle. Driver, show me your hands, Dave commanded, his voice carrying the authority of nearly 3 decades on the force. Slowly, the driver's window rolled down, and 2 hands emerged, gripping the frame. Step out of the vehicle slowly, Marcus ordered, moving to the side for a better angle, while Dave covered him. The driver complied. He was tall and thin, with a gaunt face and nervous eyes that darted between the officers and the surrounding area. He wore jeans, a faded gray t-shirt, and a lightweight jacket, despite the summer heat. License and registration, Dave said, not lowering his weapon. It sits in the glove compartment, the man stammered. My name's John Smith. Even Marcus, with far less experience than Dave, recognized the probable alias. Dave motioned for the man to stay put, while Marcus approached cautiously to retrieve the documents. The glove compartment contained a vehicle registration for a Toyota Camry, but in the name of William Thorne, not John Smith. There was no driver's license. Care to explain the name discrepancy, Mr. Smith? Dave asked, his tone making it clear he wasn't buying the story. It's my brother's car, the man said quickly. He let me borrow it. And why did you run when we tried to pull you over? I have some unpaid tickets. I panicked. Marcus and Dave exchanged glances. The story wasn't adding up. We're going to need to search the vehicle, Dave informed him. Do we have your consent, or would you prefer we call for a warrant? The man's eyes widened slightly. I don't think that's necessary. I haven't done anything wrong. The car matches the description of one involved in a home invasion, Marcus explained. Either you consent to a search, or we detain you while we secure a warrant. After a moment's hesitation, the man nodded. Fine, go ahead. Dave instructed the suspect to sit on the curb while Marcus began searching the vehicle. The front and back seats revealed nothing suspicious. Some fast food wrappers, a road atlas, and an empty coffee cup. Check the trunk, Dave suggested, keeping his eyes on the increasingly agitated suspect. Marcus nodded, moving to the rear of the vehicle. The trunk release inside the car hadn't worked, so he asked the suspect for the key. With visible reluctance, The man reached into his pocket and produced a key ring, which he handed to Marcus. The trunk opened with a soft click. And that's when Marcus saw Ita's large black duffel bag partially unzipped, revealing what was unmistakably a human hand. "Dave," he called, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. "Dave, I need you over here now." The next moments happened in a blur. The suspect, seeing that his grim cargo had been discovered, suddenly lunged at Dave. Marcus heard the struggle and turned just in time to see the man somehow now, armed with a concealed handgun, fire 2 shots directly into Dave's chest. As his partner fell, Marcus reached for his weapon, but he was a fraction of a second too slow. A searing pain tore through his shoulder as the suspect's 3rd shot found its mark. Marcus staggered, trying to maintain his stance, trying to draw his weapon with his now numbing arm. The 4th shot missed him by inches. The 5th didn't. Darkness, then light, harsh and blinding. Voices, distant at first, then clearer. "Officer down, officer down." Westlake and Pine. 2 officers down, suspect fled in a silver Camry. Marcus fought through the fog of pain and shock, recognizing the voice of Officer Patel, who must have responded to their last radio check. He tried to speak, but could only manage a groan. "Marcus, stay with me, brother. Bus is on the way." He blinked, his vision clearing enough to see Patel kneeling beside him, hands pressed firmly against the wound in his chest. Beyond Patel, he could see other officers, their movements frantic but purposeful. And beyond them, on the asphalt. "Dave!" he gasped. Patel's expression told him everything. The next hours passed in fragments: the wail of sirens, the jolt of the ambulance, the bright lights of the emergency room, the surgeon's face appearing above him, explaining something about lung damage and blood loss. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes hearing Adriana's voice, sometimes believing he was back in the patrol car with Dave, arguing about lunch options. 3 days later, Marcus awoke properly for the first time. Adriana asleep in the chair beside his hospital bed, baby Elena cradled against her chest. Captain Reynolds visited that afternoon, his face grave as he updated Marcus on the situation. Despite an extensive manhunt, the suspect, now identified as Victor Crane, a serial killer responsible for at least 7 murders across 3 states, remained at large. Dave's funeral would be held the following Tuesday. "The entire department will be there," Reynolds assured him, "and we won't rest until we find Crane." But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, Victor Crane remained a ghost. The silver Camry was found abandoned near the state line, wiped clean of prints. The body in the trunk was identified as Crane's most recent victim, a college student reported missing 2 days earlier. Dave was buried with full honors, his casket draped in the American flag, his wife and daughter accepting the folded triangle with tears streaming down their faces. Marcus, still in a wheelchair, placed his partner's badge on the casket before it was lowered into the ground. "I'll find him," he whispered. "I promise." Physical recovery was slow and painful. The chest wound had collapsed his left lung and damaged nerves that controlled his arm. After 6 surgeries and countless hours of physical therapy, the doctors finally delivered their verdict. Marcus would never regain full function of his left arm. His days as a patrol officer were over. The department offered him a desk, job evidence management, or dispatch. Marcus accepted the dispatch position, knowing he couldn't bear to be surrounded by the physical reminders of the job he could no longer do. Every night, he returned home to Adriana and Elena, forcing a smile, pretending he was adapting. Every night, after they were asleep, he sat at his computer, searching for any trace of Victor Crane. 1 year passed, then 2. Elena learned to walk, then talk, unaware of how her father flinched at sudden noises or why he sometimes woke screaming from nightmares. Adriana tried to understand, tried to help, but the gulf between them widened. The man she had married, confident, passionate, full of purpose, had been replaced by a hollow shell, obsessed with a ghost he couldn't catch. On the 3rd anniversary of Dave's death, Marcus visited the cemetery alone. Standing before the headstone, he finally allowed himself to weep for Dave, for their lost future, for the man he himself had once been. As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed with a notification. A facial recognition program he'd been running, scanning security cameras across the country, had found a potential match for Victor Crane. The image was Grania Man exiting a convenience store in a small town 2 states away, but the height, build, and the distinctive way he held his head all matched. And when Marcus zoomed in on the man's left hand, he could just make out the scar that had been noted in Crane's file. Without hesitation, Marcus booked a flight. He didn't tell Adriana where he was going, only that he had a lead. She didn't ask for details. They had stopped sharing the important things long ago. 2 days later, Marcus sat in a rental car across from a rundown motel, watching Room 14. According to the clerk, a man matching Crane's description had checked in 3 days ago, under the name Robert Johnson. He paid cash, kept to himself, and left each morning around 9, returning after dark. Marcus checked his watch. 8:45 a.m. His hand rested on the gun in his lap, not his service weapon, which he'd surrendered when he left the force, but a legally purchased replacement. He had no badge, no authority, no backup, just 3 years of rage and grief and a promise made at a graveside. At precisely 9:02, the door to Room 14 opened. Victor Crane, older, heavier, with dyed hair but unmistakably the same man, stepped out, locking the door behind him. Marcus waited until Crane had walked to the far end of the parking lot before exiting his vehicle. With practiced quiet, he approached the motel room, the lock-picking skills he'd learned during his police training still sharp despite the years. Inside, the room was neat and impersonal, no photos, no personal items beyond the necessities. But on the small desk sat a laptop, and beside it, a leather-bound journal. Marcus photographed every page of the journal with trembling hands. It contained names, dates, locations, a meticulous record of Crane's victims, including those not yet linked to him. It was the evidence that would finally bring him to justice. Or it would have been if Marcus had taken it directly to the local police. But he didn't. Instead, he waited in the room, sitting motionless in the darkest corner, the gun resting on his knee. Hours passed. Daylight faded. At 7:43 p.m., the key turned in the lock. Crane entered, flipping on the light. He froze when he saw Marcus, recognition dawning on his face. "You," he said softly. "The cop from the Camry. They said you died." "My partner did," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "I made him a promise." Crane's eyes darted to the desk, noticing the moved journal. "You won't take me in. You'd have brought backup if that was the plan." "You're right." Marcus rose from the chair. "I'm not here to arrest you." For the first time, Crane looked afraid. "Listen, I can explain what happened that day." Marcus raised the gun. "I'm not interested in explanations." "You're a cop," Crane said desperately. "You believe in justice, in the system." "I was a cop," Marcus corrected him. "Now I'm just a man keeping a promise." The shot echoed in the small room, followed by silence. The local police arrived 20 minutes later, responding to reports of gunfire. They found Marcus sitting calmly beside the body, the journal open on the desk, the gun placed carefully on the floor. He confessed immediately, making no attempt to justify or excuse what he had done. The journal provided closure for the families of 17 victims across 4 states. In a cruel irony, the evidence that would have put Crane away for life also ensured that Marcus would spend the remainder of his own behind bars. At the trial, character witnesses spoke of his exemplary service, of the trauma he had endured, of the system that had failed to find justice for his partner. None of it mattered. Marcus had crossed a line from which there was no return. The verdict was guilty. The sentence, 20 years. As he was led from the courtroom, Marcus caught sight of Adriana, holding the hand of a now 6-year-old Elena. Their eyes met briefly, before Adriana turned away, guiding their daughter toward the exit. It would be the last time he saw them together. In prison, Marcus found a strange peace. The weight he had carried for 3 years was gone. Dave's killer had been stopped. The families of Crane's victims had answers. His own future was decided. Adriana filed for divorce during his second year of incarceration. He signed the papers without protest. Elena, now being raised by a stepfather, stopped visiting after she turned 10. The prison environment too disturbing. The man her father had become too difficult to reconcile with the bedtime stories Adriana had told of a hero who protected people. On the 5th anniversary of his imprisonment, Marcus received a letter from Jessica Harlan, Dave's daughter. She was married now, expecting her first child. She wrote of forgiveness, of understanding, of the conflicted gratitude she felt toward the man who had avenged her father at the cost of his own freedom. "What you did was wrong," she wrote, "but I understand why you did it. My father would have said justice should come from the law, not from one man's hand. But he also believed that true justice meant no innocent suffered while the guilty walked free. I don't know if he would forgive you. I'm trying to." Marcus folded the letter carefully and placed it in the small box where he kept his few precious possessions, a photo of Elena as a baby, the watch Dave had given him on his 30th birthday, the Medal of Valor he'd received after pulling 3 children from a burning building. That night, lying on his narrow bed, Marcus reflected on the path that had led him here. One moment, one traffic stop, one glimpse of a black duffel bag in a trunk. If they had driven past the Camry that day, if they had been assigned to a different sector, if the trunk had remained closed for just a few minutes longer, how different everything might have been. Dave would be enjoying retirement, spoiling Jessica's baby. Marcus would be watching Elena grow, perhaps with a brother or sister by now. He would still be patrolling the streets he had sworn to protect. But there were no alternate realities, no paths not taken that he could now choose. There was only the cell, a sentence, and the knowledge that somewhere, in a cemetery across the state, his partner's grave marker no longer bore an unresolved promise. Justice, Marcus had learned, was not the clean, righteous force he had once believed in. It was messy, imperfect, and sometimes terribly personal. It could destroy as easily as it vindicated. As the lights dimmed for the night, Marcus closed his eyes. In his dreams, he was back in the patrol car, Dave beside him, the day still bright with possibility, the future unwritten, the trunk of a silver Camry still closed on its grim secret. In his dreams, they drove past without stopping,